The journey of self-discovery is one of the most universal quests we undertake in our lives, often framed in terms of finding yourself. It's a phrase many of us resonate with at various points in our lives. I just need to find myself, or I'm trying to find out who I really am. Yet, this pursuit is fundamentally flawed. The belief that we can simply stumble upon our authentic self as if it were hidden somewhere within us is an illusion. In reality, identity is not something we discover or find. It is something we create, something we forge through a series of internal and external processes that span a lifetime. The psychology of becoming helps us understand why this is the case and why identity is not a fixed, static destination but a dynamic, evolving process. 3 key thinkers provide powerful insight into the nature of becoming: Erik Erikson's stages of development, Carl Jung's process of individuation, and Friedrich Nietzsche's idea of becoming. Together, these concepts help us reframe the question of identity, showing that who we are is not something we find. It is something we must actively engage in shaping, a lifelong process of becoming. Erik Erikson, a pioneering developmental psychologist, revolutionized our understanding of identity formation by proposing that identity is not a singular moment of realization, but an ongoing process shaped across the lifespan. His theory of psychosocial development introduces the concept of identity as something that evolves through 8 distinct stages, each characterized by a central conflict. According to Erikson, these conflicts are not obstacles to our development, but opportunities for growth. The first stage, trust versus mistrust, focuses on the foundation of trust established in infancy. The second stage, autonomy versus shame and doubt, addresses the development of independence during toddlerhood. These early stages lay the groundwork for the sense of self that will unfold later on, but it is in adolescence, with the crisis of identity versus role confusion, where the notion of finding yourself becomes particularly relevant. Erikson argues that during adolescence, individuals must grapple with a sense of identity and role. This is where many people get stuck, believing that they must find themselves, when in fact they must actively explore and experiment with different roles and identities to form a cohesive sense of self. Erikson's theory reminds us that identity is never static. It is constantly evolving through life stages. It's not about finding a fixed identity, but rather navigating the challenges of each stage, each phase offering new dimensions of self-understanding and self-expression. It's important to understand that Erikson's psychosocial model doesn't imply that each stage is a discrete event, but rather a process that builds upon the previous ones. For example, the early stages in infancy and childhood, where the foundation for trust and autonomy are laid, do not disappear once they are completed. They influence the way we engage with each subsequent phase. If we had experiences of mistrust or shame during these earlier stages, they could reverberate through adolescence and adulthood, affecting how we confront future challenges. Thus, Erikson's model suggests that identity formation is more like an intricate puzzle rather than a destination. Rather than a single, uniform identity to find, we must piece together an evolving self across multiple dimensions and stages of life. His theory acknowledges that the identity quest is iterative, with new revelations and shifts occurring as we age and encounter new experiences, conflicts, and opportunities. Carl Jung, one of the most influential figures in psychology, offers another perspective on becoming with his theory of individuation. Individuation is the process of integrating different aspects of the self to achieve wholeness and authenticity. Jung believed that the individual is born with potential, but must consciously work through personal and collective unconscious elements to fully realize their true self. Individuation is not a one-time event, but a lifelong journey. It involves reconciling the conscious and unconscious parts of the self, confronting the shadow, the darker, repressed parts of the personality, and integrating these aspects into one's conscious experience. This process of self-realization involves transforming the self from something fragmented into something whole. Jung also emphasized the importance of the archetypes, universal symbols and themes that shape our inner lives in guiding us through this journey of becoming. Through the process of individuation, we come to realize that the search for the self is not a matter of finding something hidden or pre-existing, but a matter of integrating all the complex, contradictory parts of who we are. The true self is not something that can be discovered in an abstract sense, but something that emerges through the process of becoming, where we actively shape and define ourselves over time. Jung's concept of the shadow is crucial in this process of self-realization. The shadow represents the aspects of ourselves that we may not want to acknowledge, traits that society has deemed unacceptable, or qualities we have repressed out of fear or shame. Yet, Jung believed that the integration of the shadow was one of the most vital aspects of individuation. Without this integration, we cannot truly know ourselves. It is through accepting and embracing the parts of ourselves that we have hidden from view that we achieve a more complete and whole identity. Jung's individuation process reminds us that identity is not static, and it is not a question of simply identifying a singular self. Instead, it involves the deep, challenging work of understanding and integrating the multiple, often conflicting, aspects of our personalities. Through this ongoing process, we gradually shape our identity, not by discovering it all at once, but by continually working on and through the layers of our psyche. Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher whose work deeply influenced psychology, presents another crucial element in understanding the psychology of becoming. Nietzsche's concept of becoming is rooted in his rejection of fixed notions of identity. He famously declared that the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. For Nietzsche, identity is not something handed to us by society, nor is it something that we passively receive. Rather, it is something we must actively create through struggle, conflict, and self-overcoming. Nietzsche's concept of the Bermensch is an idealized vision of what we can become when we transcend conventional morality and societal expectations to create our own values. For Nietzsche, becoming is about embracing the process of self-overcoming, constantly pushing the limits of who we are and refusing to accept fixed, preordained identities. In his view, becoming is about creating meaning and purpose in a world that has no inherent meaning. To embrace this existential freedom requires the courage to confront the chaos and uncertainty of life and to forge an identity through our actions, decisions, and creative endeavors. Nietzsche's idea of becoming speaks to the active, dynamic nature of identity. It is something we must continually create and recreate through our will to power, the force that drives us to impose meaning on the world and ourselves. Identity is thus not a given, but something we must continuously strive to form and shape. Nietzsche's perspective on becoming has profound implications for our understanding of identity. If identity were something that could be found, we would be constrained by the notion that it is already pre-existing, waiting to be uncovered. But Nietzsche challenges this by asserting that identity is something we create through the process of becoming. It is not something that can be discovered like a hidden treasure, but something that emerges through our struggles, decisions, and the courageous act of creating meaning in a chaotic and indifferent world. Nietzsche's view on identity is thus liberating. It offers us the freedom to shape who we are, rather than passively accepting a prescribed identity based on societal expectations or inherited roles. So, what does this all mean for how we approach our identity? If we take these theories, Erikson's stages of development, Jung's individuation, and Nietzsche's concept of becoming, we realize that identity is not something that is found or discovered in a moment of clarity. Rather, it's something that is forged, shaped, and constantly evolving through the choices we make, the experiences we go through, and the ways we choose to respond to the challenges life throws at us. In this sense, the journey of self-discovery becomes more of a creative act than a quest to unearth some hidden, pre-existing truth about who we are. From Erikson's perspective, we can understand that identity is not something static that we find at some point in our lives. Instead, it is something that must be continuously worked on and reevaluated at each stage of life. Each stage of life presents new conflicts and challenges that help us define and refine who we are. For example, in the young adult stage, we must navigate the challenge of forming close, intimate relationships while maintaining a strong sense of self. If we fail to do so, we may experience isolation, but if we succeed, we strengthen our identity through our connections with others. Similarly, later stages in life, such as generativity versus stagnation or integrity versus despair, present opportunities for self-discovery and transformation. At every stage, our identity is shaped by how we face the challenges specific to that stage. There is no moment in which we suddenly find ourselves. We are constantly evolving, adapting, and growing. Jung's theory of individuation further strengthens this view by showing that the journey toward self-realization requires conscious engagement with all aspects of the self, including those parts we may not want to acknowledge. Through individuation, we integrate the conscious and unconscious elements of ourselves, embracing both our light and dark aspects. Rather than finding a true self, individuation offers a process of self-creation, where the self is not something we discover, but something we create through active engagement with the different aspects of our personality. This process requires introspection, self-acceptance, and a willingness to confront and integrate the shadows within us. Only by doing so can we fully realize our authentic self, which is not a fixed state, but an ever-evolving and expanding process. Nietzsche's philosophy brings this all together by emphasizing that identity is not something predetermined or fixed, but something we must actively shape and create. His concept of becoming, particularly through the idea of the Übermensch, encourage us to transcend traditional ideas of morality, social expectations, and prescribed roles. Instead of being passive recipients of societal norms, Nietzsche invites us to become the architects of our own identities. The Übermensch is a person who actively creates their own values, who does not rely on external sources to define their sense of self. Nietzsche's philosophy challenges us to embrace the freedom that comes with creating ourselves, rather than waiting for life to reveal who we are. It is only through this active process of self-overcoming, of creating meaning from chaos, that we can truly forge our identity. This concept of becoming is liberating because it frees us from the pressure to find a fixed, unchanging identity. Instead, we are invited to view identity as a dynamic process, a journey that we undertake with every decision, every action, and every relationship we form. The process of becoming means that we are never trapped in a rigid idea of who we must be. We are always in the process of becoming something new, of shedding old layers, of forging new paths, and of reinventing ourselves in ways that reflect our evolving understanding of the world and our place in it. If we stop thinking about identity as something to find and start viewing it as something to create, we unlock an entirely new way of relating to ourselves. We stop waiting for some external revelation to tell us who we are and instead take responsibility for the task of becoming who we want to be. This shift in mindset is powerful because it places the control of our identity back into our own hands. We are no longer passive victims of circumstance or predefined roles. Instead, we are active participants in the ongoing process of shaping and reshaping our sense of self. In the modern world, many of us face constant pressure to fit into predefined roles, be it in our careers, relationships, or social identities. Social media, societal expectations, and external pressures constantly bombard us with messages about who we should be, how we should look, and what we should do. This can create a sense of confusion and uncertainty about our identity, especially when we feel pulled in many different directions. However, embracing the idea of becoming, rather than finding, allows us to break free from these external pressures. We realize that we don't have to fit into any one mold. We don't have to accept a fixed identity. Instead, we can create a life and a self that is uniquely our own, guided by our values, passions, and desires, rather than by external expectations. One of the most important aspects of the becoming process is the notion of agency. As we grow and change, we have the power to choose who we want to become. We may face limitations, whether they be financial, social, or psychological, but even within these limitations, we can still make choices that reflect who we truly are. Becoming involves making intentional decisions, stepping out of our comfort zones, and embracing new experiences that challenge us and help us grow. In essence, becoming is about embracing the freedom to choose, the courage to step into uncertainty, and the strength to shape our own identity through the choices we make. As we reflect on the psychology of becoming, it becomes clear that identity is not something that is ever fixed or final. It is a process of continuous evolution, shaped by our actions, our decisions, our relationships, and our internal struggles. It is a journey that we must actively engage in, not a destination that we can reach by simply searching for it. By embracing the wisdom of Erikson, Jung, and Nietzsche, we begin to see that the path to self-realization is not one of passive discovery, but one of active creation. We are the architects of our own identity, forging it through every choice we make and every challenge we face. And in this process, we find not only our true selves, but also the freedom to continuously evolve and become more of who we are meant to be. This process of becoming is ongoing. It never ends, and that is the beauty of it. Identity is not something that is ever found. It is something that we continually create, moment by moment. It is a journey that unfolds as we navigate life's challenges, confront our fears, and embrace the opportunities for growth that come our way. The psychology of becoming reminds us that identity is not a fixed object to be discovered, but a dynamic process to be actively shaped and forged. And in this act of becoming, we discover the freedom to truly be ourselves in all of our complexity, contradiction, and potential. The journey of becoming is, ultimately, the journey of freedom.